You gave your agent an instruction. It followed it for a while. And then, 40 turns later, it did the exact thing you told it not to do with total confidence, as if the instruction had never existed. This is the single most common complaint about long agent sessions, and almost every explanation you'll read for it is wrong. Let's do this one properly. Here's the shape of it. Turn 3, you say. Never edit files under /generated. Perfectly clear. The agent acknowledges it, and for the next 30 turns, it behaves. Then somewhere around turn 40, it edits a file under /generated. And the part that makes people angry, it doesn't hesitate, it doesn't flag it, it doesn't say, I know you told me not to, but it explains why that was the sensible thing to do. Because from where it's standing, it is. The word everyone reaches for is forgot. The agent forgot. But forgetting implies there was a memory and that it decayed. Nothing was ever remembered. There is no store. There is no state that persists between turns and slowly fades. There is only a document, reread from the top, every single time, and the instruction either is in that document or it isn't. Getting this right is the difference between fixing the problem and buying a bigger model. So let's be precise about where memory actually lives. It lives in exactly one place, the transcript you resend on every call. Turn 1 is short. Turn 10 carries everything before it. Turn 40 carries all of that again from the top. The transcript is not a record of the session. It is the session, which gives you a very hard rule, and it's the whole lesson in one line. What's in the transcript, the model knows. What fell out of it does not exist. Not is deprioritized. Does not exist. And here's the collision. That document only grows, and the context window it has to fit into does not. Any session that runs long enough hits the ceiling. Not might, will. An hour of real work will do it. At which point something has to go, and somebody has to decide what. That decision is being made on every long session you run, usually by a default you never configured and never saw. So let's look at the 3 ways it gets made. There are exactly 3. You can drop, cut the oldest turns, and let them go. You can compact, replace a stretch of history with a summary of itself. Or you can externalize, write it somewhere outside the window, and keep a pointer. Every memory feature and every agent product you have ever used is one of these 3, or a mix. The interesting part is what each one costs you, and the costs are not what people expect. Option 1, and the most common by far because it is free. Keep the last n turns and drop everything older. No summarizing, no extra model call, no cost. As the conversation grows, the window slides forward, and whatever falls off the back is simply gone. It's the default in a lot of chat interfaces and a lot of homemade agent loops, and usually nobody made a decision about it. It's just what the framework does. And it has one specific, catastrophic property. Think about what actually sits at the beginning of a session. Your constraints, the goal, the reason the work is happening at all, the stuff you said once, early because you assumed saying it once, was enough. A sliding window eats exactly that, first, and keeps the last 20 turns of the agent reading files. So you end up with an agent that remembers, in perfect detail, the contents of a config file it opened 4 minutes ago, and has no idea what it was asked to do. Recency is not importance. The sliding window assumes they're the same thing, and that assumption is the bug. Option 2, compaction. When the history is too long to keep and too valuable to drop, you ask a model to summarize it, and you replace the original turns with that summary. 30 turns of exploration become 400 tokens of conclusions. The session keeps going, the window has room again, and from the outside it looks seamless. This is what your coding agent means when it says it's compacting the conversation. It is a genuinely good idea, and it is the best of the 3. But it is lossy, and it is lossy in a specific direction that you should understand before you trust it. Here is roughly what makes it through, and it is worth memorizing. Surviving. What the task is, what's been done, conclusions that were actually stated, and anything you repeated several times. Summarizers are good at the main thread of a story, not surviving. A constraint you mentioned once, early. Why an approach was tried and rejected. The exact wording of a rule, which gets paraphrased into something looser. And anything that was implicit and never said out loud. Look at those two lists again, because the pattern is brutal. The right-hand column is precisely the column that stops the agent doing something stupid. And there's a deeper reason it goes wrong, which has nothing to do with the summarizer being bad at its job. Ask who writes that summary, a model in the middle of your session with no idea what you are about to ask next. So it does the reasonable thing and writes a good account of what happened. But that isn't what you need. You need the working set for what comes next, and which parts of the past matter as a function of the future, which nobody in that moment knows. A readable history and a useful working set are not the same document, and compaction quietly gives you the first one. Here's the first failure, and it's the one from the opening. Turn 3, you said, never edit files /generated, they're rebuilt by the build step, a hard rule with a reason attached. Turn 38, after compaction, what's left is, user prefers to avoid changing generated files where possible. Nothing was dropped, it was paraphrased. Never became prefers to avoid, where possible appeared out of nowhere. And the agent, reading that in good faith, decides that this time it is not possible, and it is behaving correctly, given what it was handed. Second failure. At turn 12 you tried something, the caching approach, say, and it failed for a specific reason, and you moved on. That reason was never written anywhere. It was just a thing that happened in the conversation. At turn 50, the agent proposes the caching approach, brightly, as a new idea. And this one is structural, not accidental. In any narrative summary, a path you tried and abandoned is a detour, the least important thing to keep. But for not repeating work, it is the single most valuable thing in the entire session. So, the fixes. The first one is the one that actually works, and it's boring. Take the things that must not blur and put them in a file the agent rereads. A file is not a memory, it's a fact. It can't be paraphrased into something weaker, because nothing is summarizing it. It's being read verbatim every time. 3 headings will do: constraints, decisions, dead ends. Especially dead ends, since we just established that summaries throw those away first. Writing that file is worth more than any amount of prompt tuning, and this is exactly what every project notes convention you've seen is quietly doing. Second fix, and it costs nothing. If a rule has to hold for the whole session, it does not belong in a chat message. It belongs in the system prompt, because the system prompt is resent on every single call, and turn 3 is not. Same words, completely different lifetime. The general form is worth writing on a wall. If it matters at turn 50, it cannot live in a message from turn 3. Anything session long goes somewhere session long. Everything else is hoping the summarizer agrees with you about what was important. Third fix, and it's the cheapest of all, write things in a shape that resists paraphrase. Prose blurs. I think we should probably stay away from touching that directory. It's 4 hedges deep before the summarizer even gets to it, and it will come out the other side as a mild preference. A labeled line does not blur. Constraint, colon, no rights, to /generated. Reason, colon, rebuilt by the build step. A summarizer will keep that almost verbatim, because there is nothing in it to compress. Structure is armor against summarization, and it costs you nothing but the habit. If you keep one thing from this lesson, keep this. Memory is not a property the session has. It's an artifact, something you deliberately write down in a place that gets read again. Everything you don't write down is a bet that a summarizer you never saw will happen to keep the thing you'll need. Sometimes that bet wins. Over a long enough session, run enough times, it loses. And the failure is silent, which is what makes it expensive. 2 caveats, honestly. First, compaction is getting better, and some specifics here will age. What won't age is the structural part. A summarizer in the middle of your session cannot know what you are about to need next, so something will always have to be pinned by hand. That's a property of time, not of model quality. Second, and more practical, don't build a memory system for a short task. Under 20 turns, none of this bites. Writing a constraints file for a 5-turn session is pure ceremony. This starts paying somewhere around turn 30 and pays enormously by turn 100. So that's the whole thing. Nothing is remembered, because there's nothing to remember with, only a document that gets reread. That document has a ceiling, so history gets dropped or compacted, and what compaction loses is exactly the constraints and the dead ends. You fix it by externalizing what must not blur, by putting session-long rules somewhere session-long, and by writing them in a shape that resists paraphrase. Your agent never forgot anything, you just told it once. Next time, we open up the other half of the window, what tool calling actually looks like from the model's side.